to the rhythm made down to brown paper. Hey, what? Call all the road boy there. Sounds of a ringer of a different nature. Rhythms get great, the rhythms they get greater. It's another rhythm form for the chaser. New configuration, new riff, a new structure. Built on a frame that'll hold, that won't puncture. Tight, we wrap it up, it's right, tightly. Step to the rhythm, that don't step too lightly. Step, 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 step. Yeah. You know you gotta step, 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 step. It's another rougher, tough form. New configuration, new riff, a new structure. Yes, sir, another rougher, tough form. New configuration, new riff, a new structure. Yes, sir, another rougher, tough form.
Holla if you're here because you wanna bury your sorrow in a vibe, honey. All of your troubles don't seem so amplified, 'cause inside we're brave. Can't take you over deeply, no appetite. Got the vibe, honey. We let the specialist be seen for supply. We put it down, and I'll be telling us, yeah, yeah. Spin another vibe, bro. We lift the light up when the night ends. You'll be leaving on a high note. Get out the hyper, yeah, yeah. Spin another vibe, bro. We lift the light up when the night ends. You'll be leaving on a high note. Get out the, get out the. And you'll be singing higher, you'll be singing higher in no time. Like I don't wanna go, like I don't wanna go, go, go home. I don't wanna stay now. You'll be singing higher, yeah, yeah. Get out the, get out the. It's a little hard sometimes to feel the quiet. Holla if you're settling, we'll let it spin whenever tired. Getting into overload, don't lose your flow. Holla if you're here because you wanted us to take control with the vibe, honey. All of your troubles don't seem so amplified, 'cause inside we're brave. Can't take you over deeply, no appetite. That's a vibe, honey. We got the specialist beating for supply. We put it down, and I'll be telling us, yeah, yeah. Spin another vibe, bro. We lift the light up when the night ends. You'll be leaving on a high
Yeah, hello. Good evening. Good evening for me. I don't know where the rest of you people are. But here in reality, it's the evening. I'm gonna let this play for a little bit because I'm enjoying it a little bit too much. This is Weapon S in the mix on RTR FM, our local alternative radio station. Long live RTR FM. I will begin in approximately 5 minutes. Oh my god, sick tune. Hyperextension by Ivan Obadov.
Nice and energy. A bit of energy to start the show. Usually I start on a bit of liquid funk, a little bit of old school, but you know, we're keeping you guessing in 2026. Sending one out to 306 who says, yes, Weapon S, crank it up. It's 2026. Thank you. I think you're referring to the BPM, I believe, and not the volume, because I can assure you 306 is very loud here in the studio. Going to send another shout out to JC, who gave us some wonderful shows while I was away. And I got to say though, he missed a crucial opportunity. He played the New Year's Eve edition because New Year's Eve fell on Wednesday. And your 4 o'clock classic today is actually what I would have played. And the only hint at this point is 2003 and New Year's Eve. And that's all I'm going to say.
This is off the that was off the recording. This is a Firestorm EP by Ivan Obadov from Cosmos Music, which is a label, an imprint I've never heard of personally, but it's founded in Moscow, Russia, 2006. If you have a problem with Russia, I don't know what to tell you. The one, Mappy Swift. This is a classic.
bit of Mamby Swift for your Wednesday afternoon. This is the one, and quite literally the one that you would know the most, I think. One of his most famous releases. The DJ's DJ, Mamby Swift. Who went to Mamby Swift? He played a solid, what was it, like 5 hours? Nah, 3. How many hours? I was there. And I've already forgotten. It was a great gig. Lots of good people, having a fun old time, having a boogie. Was it 3 hours or was it 5? Wow, how's my memory? We heard from Emily Mackis and K Motions before this. And sending one out to you if you were in attendance at Nobu, I think they played. Yes, No One But Us, Emily Max and K Motions. And I've got a tune coming from Mosey after this one as well. Just a little bit of a homage to all of you that enjoyed that wonderful day of drum and bass. 306 just texted in, it was 5 hours. I thought it was 5. I feel like 3 hour sets are like obviously long, but not wow factor these days. And I say that like as if I could do 3 hours. Well, I do too. Yeah, I could do 3 hours, yeah. 0405 921 921 if you would like to guess.
Looking at here.
Is it brand new? We just got them in. Just touch the trigger, the beam comes on, and you can't miss. So, which will it be? We close early today.
I have to do this shit every time.
Do that.
Speaking of really long sets, the longest set I've ever seen was by a fellow named DJ Fierce. There's another fellow named Fierce around now, but it was a person of color from Britain. But the other DJ Fierce from the Metalheadz imprint did like a 4 or 5 hour set, coked out of his mind, and like a little before halfway through, like he was just completely messing up the mix. And people were like, as I recall, I think this is what they were doing. A couple of people came up to him, talking to him, trying to get him to get off the set, like trying to get him to get off the decks, and he just wouldn't do it. He was just off his face and just kept mixing for 4 hours. But to his credit, I don't know if it was because the crowd was entertained by his complete gurning, or if they were actually... I mean, it was a pretty good set. Gotta hand it to him, even though he was fucking it up a lot. He was train wrecking it. But, that was a memorable night. A memorable night.
Just touch the trigger, the beam comes on, and you can't miss.
Alright, we're gonna look at a video on the,
Which will it be? All wrong.
I can't control the volume on this. Oh well. We're going to look at a video on the modern Zapatista movement. I don't know a great deal about the Zapatista. I don't know a great deal about South American politics in general, aside from the broad strokes, you know, the Monroe Doctrine and what have you. So we're going to look at this in light of the film that I watched the other night about Emiliano Zapatista. This isn't going to explain anything about him, I don't think. It's more about the modern continuation of the Zapatista movement.
On New Year's Day, 1994, the southern Mexican state of Chiapas woke to a spectacle. Masked and armed indigenous militants marched through the streets of its largest city, San Cristobal de las Casas, declaring that a revolution had begun. Their message? Ya basta. Enough already. The indigenous peoples of Mexico, having suffered 500 years of colonial oppression, would suffer no more. The time for their liberation was at hand. By the break of dawn, the city hall had been occupied, land records destroyed, and prisoners freed. Elsewhere, an as yet unknown guerrilla leader calling himself Subcomandante Marcos seized the police station and distributed arms to his troops. As he explained to a pair of shocked tourists, "We are sorry for the inconvenience, but this is a revolution." Hours later, knowing that state retribution would be swift, the rebels abandoned San Cristobal. Over the next 12 days, until a ceasefire was declared, the rebels battled the Mexican army across the rugged interior of Chiapas. When the smoke cleared and an unsteady truce was called, 145 men and women lay dead, most of them rebels. Though the insurgents had failed to seize lasting control over the urban areas of Chiapas, ostensibly the first step in an audacious plan to advance to Mexico City and seize the nation's capital, they had survived the military counterattack. They were now in a position to negotiate while constructing a system of radical autonomy in the remote and impoverished indigenous communities from which they launched their momentous uprising. The Zapatista Army of National Liberation, or EZLN, had made its debut, and they were here to stay.
No sé cómo sanar esta herida, la tengo abierta.
The days of upheaval that would come to be known as the 1994 Zapatista Uprising may have taken the white and mestizo elites of Mexico by surprise. But the Zapatista Uprising was only the public unveiling of a movement years in the making. Behind it lies a history of 500 years of colonial dispossession in the largely Maya zones of the Chiapas hinterland, as well as a more recent history of left-wing insurgency in urban Mexico during the late 20th century. The Zapatista Army of National Liberation was the product of this revolutionary encounter. As the EZLN organized itself, setting up clandestine training camps in the jungles of Chiapas and assembling an arsenal, officials in the halls of power of Washington and Mexico City were hashing out the details of a comprehensive new neoliberal trade policy, the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. Combined with changes to the Mexican Constitution that dissolved communal land use traditions in favor of private ownership, NAFTA presented serious threats to the livelihoods of smallholder farmers, especially indigenous peasants in primarily agricultural states such as Chiapas. This was the context in which the EZLN began planning its public unveiling, culminating in the uprising of January 1st, 1994, the same day that NAFTA went into effect. Over the past 30 years, the Zapatistas have become known internationally for their unique system of indigenous autonomy, which outsiders have described as taking influences from anarchism and socialism, though the Zapatistas themselves reject these terms. Zapatista ideology is a syncretic mix of various influences and elements, drawing from both the indigenous cultures of Mexico and strands of radical leftism. They reject the state, capitalism, neoliberalism, and globalization, advocating instead for indigenous sovereignty, direct democracy, women's rights, the communalization of property, and autonomous systems of education, healthcare, law, and economic production. The success of their autonomous project has inspired countless other social movements across Latin America and the world, drawing frequent comparisons to liberation movements in Kurdistan, Palestine, and beyond.
Fucking sick, man.
Subcomandante Marcos, in particular, became a global sensation as an icon of Latin American revolution, whose suave charisma and warrior poet persona served to elevate the Zapatista movement. His books soon appeared in numerous languages and bookstores around the world, while his masked face soon graced t-shirts and album covers like the new Che Guevara. In November 2023, the EZLN broke their long silence by issuing a series of communiques declaring major changes to their system of autonomy. The old system, criticized for centralizing power and limiting the autonomy of local communities, was replaced by one that aims to decentralize and democratize Zapatista politics. The tenuous situation of the Zapatistas, 30 years from their dramatic uprising in 1994, raises vital questions regarding the future of this unique and globally influential, yet vulnerable social movement. To better understand where the Zapatistas are today, and where they might go from here, the modern insurgent dispatched a reporting team to Chiapas to attend the uprising's 30th anniversary. New Year's Day, 1994. This is where it all began. Nestled between the mountains of the central highlands of Chiapas, San Cristobal de las Casas is an unassuming city of cobblestone streets and adobe walls, built in the old colonial style. Today, tourists flock to colonial-era monuments, while indigenous merchants hawk goods in the bustling marketplace.
The closed captions are struggling, even though he's speaking quite clearly.
30 years ago, this city was briefly a battleground. Our team stopped here in the days leading up to the anniversary to speak with experts on the Zapatista uprising, its aftermath, and the status of Zapatista autonomy 30 years later.
I'll be right back.
In the Nabolom archive in San Cristobal, we spoke with historian and archivist Gregorio Vázquez, whose research in the archives and fieldwork with indigenous communities in the Lacandon jungle has brought him into close contact with the Zapatistas. Vázquez welcomed us into the archive to provide the historical context behind the uprising using source materials from the time.
Estamos en el archivo José Weber. Es un archivo de un educador alemán que llega en los años 40 a San Cristóbal y se establece hasta su muerte en el 83. uno de los periódicos importantes en San Cristóbal que va a registrar las actividades de las comunidades indígenas antes del EZLN y después del EZLN, después de la aparición pública, es el periódico Tiempo. El periódico Tiempo era un periódico formado, fue fundado por Concepción Villafuerte y Amado Avendaño, personas con una posición política de izquierda que tenían claro cuáles eran como las situaciones que estaban viviendo las comunidades indígenas. Por ejemplo, este es uno de los periódicos que en lo personal creo que explora mucho del avance en la organización de la comunidad indígena. Chiapas, del Congreso Indígena a la Guerra Campesina. El Congreso Indígena se da en 1974, es la primera organización donde los grupos indígenas de Chiapas de diferentes etnias se reúnen para hablar de cuáles son los problemas sociales que están atravesando. A partir de eso en las mismas comunidades se van a ir organizando poco a poco para defender cuestiones de tierra, de educación, de justicia, cuestiones agrarias. Y después se van a recrudecer principalmente los ataques militares y ataques gubernamentales hacia las comunidades organizadas. Entonces creo que este es uno de estos textos que permite entender cómo del 74 al 94 hay 20 años de organización política dentro de los espacios. Los zapatistas siempre han dicho que ellos no quisieron tomar otros personajes como Marx, como Engels, como Stalin, como Lenin. ¿Por qué? Porque esos personajes no eran conocidos por la población campesina ni la población indígena. Zapata era un referente fuerte para la población mexicano, con la gente que se identificaba, y por tanto pues las ideas de Zapata florecieron con más rapidez que pues las mismas concepciones marxistas que se manejaban en el espacio. Las demandas que exige el EZLN en 1994 son las mismas demandas que se estaban estableciendo en 1974 cuando se realiza el Congreso Nacional Indígena, y esas demandas son las mismas demandas que se exigían en 1950 cuando llega el INI, y esas mismas demandas son las que existían en 1934 cuando se crea el primer departamento indígena en el estado. Y esas mismas, pareciera irónico, pero a 2023 son las mismas demandas. Sigue siendo salud, territorio, educación, cultura.
Some still remember clearly the early days of the uprising 30 years later. We spoke with Gaspar Morquecho, a journalist and anthropologist who was one of the first on the scene on the morning of January 1st, 1994. Morquecho recalls speaking with Subcomandante Marcos on the steps of the City Hall of San Cristóbal on that historic day.
Mi nombre es Gaspar Morquecho Camilla, soy antropólogo y de alguna manera le sigo dando seguimiento al movimiento. Pues el evento más importante es, después de la declaración de guerra, 10 días de combate, el gobierno federal decreta el cese al fuego, ¿sí? Y el EZLN acepta el cese al fuego. ¿Y qué se va a dar? Se crearon las condiciones para el primer diálogo con el gobierno federal que se va a celebrar aquí en la Catedral de San Cristóbal de las Casas. Eso fue muy interesante porque el 1 de enero del 94 frente al Palacio, que fue cuando yo conozco a Marcos, que está por ahí, muy temprano, nada más.
I'm just going to move the closed captions around a little bit.
Y nos conocimos. Y sabía, me presento Gaspar Morquecho de Chiltac. Ah, sí, Amado Bendaño, Conchita, el periódico Tiempo, ¿no? Que por aquí anda un ejemplar del periódico. Y dije, ¿y este cabrón de dónde nos conoce? O sea, conocía todo, pues tenía, como jefe militar, tenía muy bien ubicado a varios de los referentes. Y hubo un momento en el que le dije, ¿y van a dialogar? Claro, vamos a dialogar. Entonces yo volteé como diciendo, no te creo. ¿Cómo vas a dialogar si andan acá? Se molestó. se molestó mucho al dudar yo de su afirmación. Entonces le dije, ¿cómo van a dialogar? Y ya muy serio y con otro tono de voz, sacó el arma con esto. Con las armas en la mano. Y efectivamente llegan al diálogo, la delegación del ZLN, llegaron con las armas en la mano. O sea, la cuestión simbólica, la cuestión en concreto y el hecho de que no permitía que se dudara de lo que planteaban, ¿no?
Our team's time in San Cristobal in the days leading up to the 30th anniversary of the Zapatista uprising provided clear insights into the historical context of Zapatismo and the changes experienced by the movement over the past 3 decades. To understand the status of the Zapatistas today and where their movement might go from here, however, we had to get closer to the source. On the eve of the anniversary, we headed to the Caracol of Dolores Hidalgo to attend the commemorations in person, the first public event held in Zapatista territory in several years. Dolores Hidalgo is one of 12 Zapatista caracoles, a type of interface compound where the Zapatistas hold events and receive outside visitors, who were typically not permitted direct access to Zapatista communities. As our car trundled up the badly worn road to the Caracol, we passed sign after sign announcing our entrance into Zapatista autonomous territory. Here, the people command and the government obeys, read 1, a typical maxim that embodies the movement's principle of popular rule and government accountability. The movement's ubiquitous red star adorned the walls of buildings on which were painted murals depicting Emiliano Zapata standing alongside the masked militants who bear his name. As we pulled into the Caracol itself, hundreds depicting Emiliano Zapata the walls of buildings on which were painted murals depicting Emiliano Zapata standing alongside the masked militants who bear his name. As we pulled into the Caracol itself, hundreds of masked insurgents in the brown and green uniform of the EZLN stood at attention along the roadside, red bandanas neatly tied around their necks. Outside of the large wooden enclosure where the commemoration events were held, a sea of tents extending in all directions showed the huge size of the audience drawn to the remote mountains of Chiapas to show their support for the rebels. Clearly, despite the challenges faced by the Zapatista movement in recent years, it still enjoys considerable outside interest and support. The sounds of various Maya languages mingled with those of Spanish, English, Italian, German, and numerous other languages. The atmosphere resembled a mix of Woodstock and Occupy. Notably, drugs and alcohol were strictly prohibited, as they are within Zapatista territory in general. As the EZLN stated in a communique prior to the anniversary event, this was no party. In the community kitchens, Zapatista community members were hard at work boiling huge pots of soup and coffee. Food and drink were mostly free, illustrating the profitless orientation of Zapatista economics. None of the community members present would consent to an interview. We were informed repeatedly that the Zapatistas themselves were forbidden from speaking to press. We were nonetheless able to observe some of the events put on at the anniversary that shed light on life in Zapatista territory today. Throughout the day of the anniversary, a series of pedagogical theatrical productions paid homage to crucial moments in Zapatista history and demonstrated how their model of autonomy works in practice. One play told the 500-year story of colonialism in Chiapas, beginning with the Spanish conquest and continuing through the Zapatista uprising. Another illustrated how a Zapatista woman might bring a domestic violence case to the autonomous court system. And a third demonstrated the workings of the Zapatista education system. In Chiapas, the Mexican state with the highest literacy rate at nearly 14%, these theatrical performances are an effective way to teach local history and communicate the lessons of Zapatismo. To one side of the theatrical enclosure, Zapatistas sold books and posters bearing art and political slogans. There was even a board game for sale called Autonomía Zapatista, Zapatista Autonomy. The numerous books on sale, many authored by Subcomandante Marcos, but many others written by academics and journalists, point to the intellectual undercurrent of zapatismo. Everywhere, masked insurgents in the green and brown uniforms of the EZLN stood a watchful guard over the anniversary event. There were at least several hundred militants in attendance, staying in a separate camp to which visitors were denied access. Many were women, a sign of the central place of women within the Zapatista movement. Estimates have placed the number of women in the EZLN at about 1/3 of all combatants. In a highly patriarchal region of Mexico, women's rights have always been one of the pillars of Zapatista politics.
So sick, man.
One of the threats facing the Zapatistas today is the problem of youth disengagement. 30 years ago, revolutionary optimism was in the air. The partisans of the EZLN were young and full of fervor. Now, the original rebels are older, and the movement consolidated. Zapatista youths, those born after the uprising, are left with the difficult and unglamorous task of maintaining the revolutionary framework that their parents set up. But some, dissatisfied with the limitations and difficulties of life in the Zapatista territories, and attracted by economic prospects and the allures of mainstream culture and society, are abandoning the territory for the cities, challenging the long-term prospects of Zapatista autonomy. At the center of the compound stood a stage where the Comandancia, the clandestine revolutionary leadership of the EZLN, would assemble to speak at the stroke of midnight on New Year's Day 2024. Before they arrived, however, our team spoke with several prominent Zapatista allies present at the anniversary to shed light on the significance of the movement today. In the early years of the Zapatista movement, the EZLN pointedly rejected participation in political processes at the national level. Faced with the history of fraudulent elections and corruption in Mexican politics, and the nature of what the Zapatistas term the bad government of the Mexican state, the EZLN rejected the legitimacy of the formal political process. However, in 2017, during the National Indigenous Congress held in San Cristobal de las Casas, the EZLN broke with their record of abstaining from electoral politics by endorsing the first indigenous woman ever to run for president in Mexico, the Nahua traditional healer and human rights advocate Maria de Jesus Patricio Martinez. The affectionately named Marichoy ran as an independent candidate in the 2018 presidential election, losing to Andrés Manuel López Obrador, whom the EZLN has since extensively criticized. Despite her loss of the presidential bid, the EZLN's decision to explicitly endorse Marichoy's run marked a shift in the group's willingness to engage in national politics on the electoral level. We caught up with Marichoy at the anniversary, where she told me how the Zapatistas are a model point of reference for all indigenous Mexicans in their pursuit of autonomy and justice nationwide.
Mi nombre es María de Jesús Patricio, soy concejal, miembro del Congreso Nacional Indígena de un pueblo náhuatl del sur de Jalisco. Y pues más bien el acercamiento, la relación es a través como pueblos que somos y que como acá también hay pueblos. Entonces, pues se convoca una asamblea por ahí en el 1995, una asamblea nacional indígena convocada por nuestros hermanos zapatistas, y es como nos damos cita los diferentes pueblos a nivel nacional, y de ahí empieza una nueva relación entre pueblos que se concentran a ese llamado que nos hacen. Entonces, de ahí se da lo de el pensar, bueno, si somos pueblos, somos hermanos, tenemos los mismos problemas en los diferentes lugares de donde venimos, pues yo creo que es bueno tener un espacio propio como pueblos. Y entonces se fue pensando y se fue construyendo lo que dio origen a lo que es el Congreso Nacional Indígena. Es un espacio que surge a raíz de ese llamamiento, y entonces pues de ahí hasta ahorita pues hemos estado, ya tenemos 27 años de conformados. Entonces, esa es la relación que ha habido, ¿verdad? Como pueblos, como hermanos y la situación que se vive pues en cada pueblo de despojo y también de violencia que últimamente se está viviendo, ¿verdad? Entonces, pues es eso, pues, ¿no? Es que cuando se participó en este proceso electoral 2017-2018, fue una, ¿cómo les quiero explicar? Como un sacudir a México, ¿verdad? Como un llamado de que no está la solución a los problemas o a través de unas urnas o de un partido, sino que tenemos que buscar otras formas organizativas y no es a través de las elecciones. Era como esos dos objetivos, como que volteáramos a ver que si no hay organización, quede quien quede, la situación va a seguir igual. Y la organización abajo, ¿verdad? En los pueblos real, porque no es organizarse para unas elecciones o para estar en el poder, sino cómo vamos construyendo desde abajo otra forma que no cabe en las urnas, como decían nuestros hermanos. Entonces fue así como un sacudir, como un que voltearan a ver que los pueblos están siendo masacrados, acabados y que los de arriba no voltean a ver eso, solamente los utilizan para obtener los votos y ¿verdad? Alguien decía, es que nos vamos a meter a la fiesta de los ricos, ¿verdad? Y para echarles a perder su fiesta, ¿verdad? Entonces era usar sus mismas herramientas, pero para hacer visible que todo eso nada más lo usan, pero para favorecer un equipo, un grupo. Un ejemplo pues son lo que están haciendo nuestros hermanos en este proceso, pues los pueblos que tienen sus propias formas de tomar decisión y que a veces son por los programas de gobierno, pues los lesionan por los megaproyectos. Entonces es como retomar esa organización propia que se tiene en los pueblos y que ha sido lesionada. Pues como decimos en los pueblos, la libre determinación de decir aquí en la comunidad, como es mi tierra, es mi gente, es mi costumbre, yo aquí decido qué se hace, ¿verdad? Es tomar en cuenta a la asamblea, la decisión de la asamblea, y si se equivoca, pues se equivocó todos, pues, ¿verdad? Entonces,
Marichoy was not the only Indigenous activist present at the anniversary whom we spoke with. We also met with two Otomi delegates from the CNI, Isabel Valencia and Sara Hernández Jiménez, who told us what Zapatista autonomy means to them.
A partir de que ellos llegan a decir que nos conquistaron, ¿no? Desde hace 531 años, ellos manejan, llegamos y conquistamos México, conquistamos a los pueblos, y hoy estamos aquí para decirle pues que mintieron. No fue una conquista, fue una masacre, fue un saqueo, se llevaron todo lo que teníamos los pueblos originarios en riqueza y aún lo siguen haciendo. Es un saqueo que no ha terminado, que en su momento fue oro, fue todo lo que teníamos como tangible, y hoy hay este oro que uno no lo puede ver, no lo puede percibir porque está en las montañas, porque es el agua, porque es el bosque, y todo eso es lo que estamos defendiendo, esa parte de que en su momento dijeron fue conquista y los conquistamos y le quitamos todo, pero no es así. Entonces esa lucha es la que se viene haciendo, y fue precisamente como esa lanza que se hizo en su momento hace 30 años, que ahorita se está festejando, pero antes de los 30 años empezaron 10 años antes. Entonces son 40 años de esta lucha, de este caminar, y de decir que sí podemos resistir, sí podemos luchar contra la muerte, ¿no? Porque la muerte es el capitalismo pueblo que llega disfrazado de progreso, disfrazado de trabajo, que es lo que nos han dicho, que si viene una empresa vamos a tener mucho trabajo, y los pueblos sabemos que no es así. Los pueblos sabemos que ese trabajo va a ser por poco tiempo y al final de cuentas tu parcela donde sembrabas ya no vas a poder sembrar. ¿Por qué? Porque ya va a haber un hotel ahí, porque ya va a haber un Starbucks, porque ya va a haber un centro comercial, y eso es lo que ellos llaman progreso, es lo que ellos llaman trabajo hacia las comunidades y hacia los pueblos. Y hoy en día hemos entendido y sabemos que todo lo que nos dicen es mentira, ¿no?
Entonces, para nosotros es una inspiración la lucha zapatista, porque sabemos que juntos se pueden lograr lo que el Estado dice que no es posible. Parar megaproyectos, liberar a nuestros detenidos, que presenten a nuestros desaparecidos, algunos, ¿verdad?, con esa presión de todos los pueblos, de mucha gente consciente. Pues más bien somos como una red, ¿no? Entonces, en donde nos dañan a uno tenemos que responder todos. Y pues más bien nosotros decimos que ellos son nuestros hermanos mayores que nos enseñan un camino más adelantado y rutas por donde nosotros podemos seguir de acuerdo a nuestros contextos, nuestros tiempos y pues a nuestras posibilidades también.
Por eso es esta lucha en conjunta de todos los pueblos, y por eso hoy estamos aquí festejando, porque esta lucha es para todos y para todas, porque también es a nivel mundial, ya no es México, ya no es Europa, ya no es en otra parte del mundo. Definitivamente yo creo que muchas hermanas y hermanos estaban como dormidos y hoy están despertando y hoy están diciendo y están defendiendo la tierra, ¿no? Al estar aquí en esta fiesta que se está celebrando hoy, al cumplirse 30 años y 40 años, se puede decir, de una lucha tan fuerte. Entonces también los pueblos hemos dicho que si tienes tu historia no estás muerto, ¿no? Sin historia sí estás muerto. Entonces los pueblos tenemos nuestra historia.
Pues más bien es una referencia para toda la humanidad, porque recordemos que si no hay naturaleza no hay vida, si no hay árboles no hay oxígeno, si no hay agua no hay vida. Entonces es un referente de vida para toda la humanidad y una fuerza, nosotros decimos, es un escudo de esta destrucción fatal que es para todos, no nada más para zapatistas o no zapatistas, sino que es esta destrucción capitalista, es como ellos dicen, de muerte, y es para todos.
After speaking with the CNI representatives, we stepped back while the festivities continued throughout the day and into the night. Finally, nearing midnight, the formal anniversary ceremony began. One by one, the uniformed militants of the Zapatista Army of National Liberation filed out of their camp and into the two main enclosures of the Caracol. Since the 90s, the EZLN has seldom been seen with real weapons, preferring wooden substitutes. However, the rifles they carried in 1994 are still sequestered in the jungle, ready in case they should ever be needed again. Although the display of several hundred insurgents marching in unison seemed impressive enough to our team, we were told that this was only a small portion of the entire EZLN army, which is never present in its entirety on any single occasion. As the militants put on their martial display, the Comandancia arrived under escort and took their seats on the central stage. In a symbolic move typical of Zapatista theatrics, the first row of seats on the stage consisted of empty chairs, each marked with text representing an absent demographic: the disappeared, the murdered, political prisoners, and the casualties of more than 500 years of colonialism, among others. The Zapatistas have not forgotten the martyrs of their struggle. As the music died down and the insurgent army stood at attention, Subcomandante Moises, the successor of Subcomandante Marcos as the head spokesperson of the EZLN, took his place at the podium to address the thousands gathered there from across Chiapas, Mexico, and the whole world. Subcomandante Moises, an indigenous Tzeltal militant who was one of the original leaders of the Zapatista movement, first delivered his 20-minute speech in his native language, before repeating it in Spanish.
Compañeros, compañeras, están viendo, ahí está, las sillas de los ausentes y ausentas. No están las madres y los padres buscadoras. No están las desaparecidas y desaparecidos. No están las presas políticas y presos políticos. No están las asesinadas y asesinados. No están los jóvenes y jóvenes asesinados, asesinadas. No están las niñas y los niños asesinados. También no están nuestros tatarabuelos, los que lucharon hace más de 500 años. Pero también no están nuestros compañeros caídos que ya lo cumplieron su deber. La propiedad debe de ser del pueblo y común. Y el pueblo se tiene que gobernarse en sí mismo. No necesitamos esos que están ahí. Ellos creen que saben todo. Deciden por los maestros, deciden por los doctores, deciden por todos los sectores de trabajadores. Como quien dice que son sabelotodo. Son sabelotodo porque ahí ganan dinero sin trabajar, sin sudar. No. Por eso el pueblo es la que tiene que saber gobernarse.
As Subcomandante Moises finished his speech, the clock struck midnight, marking 30 years from the beginning of the experiment in indigenous autonomy that the EZLN launched in 1994. Fireworks exploded above, cheers rose up from the crowd, and a party began that would outlast the night. Back in Mexico City, we met with Pedro Valtierra, a prominent photojournalist who shot some of the most emblematic photos of the Zapatista uprising and its aftermath. In his office, he showed us a famous photograph taken in the highlands of Chiapas in 1998, capturing Zapatista women confronting the soldiers occupying their land.
Mi relación con los zapatistas es que, bueno, como periodista estuve cubriendo el levantamiento y antes había estado trabajando mucho en la región de Chiapas, todas sus comunidades, sus grupos. Bueno, llegué, como te decía, en el 94, el día 3 de enero, como muchos periodistas que nos dimos cuenta y nos enteramos del levantamiento, estábamos ahí ya desde el día 3, para retratar todo el levantamiento, todo lo que tenía que ver. Yo me di a la tarea de buscarlos, de tratar de hacer algunas cosas exclusivas o especiales, ¿no? Lanzándome a la selva con pocos recursos y solo, ¿no? Me sorprendió mucho ver el levantamiento. Yo había estado, como te digo, en otros levantamientos, en otras luchas, en otras historias, en El Salvador, en Centroamérica, y nunca me imaginé que nosotros fuéramos a tener un levantamiento con esas características, ¿no? Nunca imaginé que en México fuera a pasar eso. Sabía que en Chiapas la situación económica es complicada, la marginación de la mayor parte de la población, ¿no? Que tienen condiciones económicas sumamente débiles, pero yo no imaginé que iba a haber en Chiapas lo que antes había visto en Guatemala o en Nicaragua, en El Salvador, no, nunca me lo imaginé, fue sorpresa. Creo que madurar en su idea, en su propuesta política, se han ido, me parece, hasta donde yo puedo entender, logrando los objetivos que se plantearon, con toda la limitación que tienen por parte del Estado, por las condiciones económicas, por las condiciones sociales y por el entorno, pienso que es difícil. Sin embargo, creo que han tenido avances sustanciales en cuanto a que, por otro lado, pues son autónomos del Estado, mantienen una disciplina social importante, lo que les permite darle una organización diferente a la que existe en otras comunidades, ¿no? Es una fotografía que me tocó tomar el día 3 de enero del 98. Estaba muy reciente la matanza de Acteal. Un grupo de paramilitares había matado a 46 personas, mujeres, niños, señores, ancianos, y los había masacrado prácticamente. Mató a 46, pero 4 mujeres de esas 46 estaban embarazadas y también les abrieron el vientre y mataron al bebé. Esas personas que habían sido asesinadas por unos paramilitares huyeron a un campamento que se llamaba Soyep, y cuando se da la matanza yo estoy en Chiapas y luego vamos con el reportero de la jornada, Juan Balboa. Llegamos y la gente en ese momento se estaba organizando para protestar por la presencia del ejército. El ejército había llegado un día antes a cuidarlos al campamento, a cuidarlos según ellos, y las mujeres reclamaron, las mujeres y los hombres reclamaban la presencia del ejército ahí y les pedían que se fueran. Hicieron una manifestación y fueron y les dijeron que se fueran, y finalmente el ambiente se fue poniendo tenso. Las mujeres cada vez se fueron acercando más a los soldados. Llegó un momento en que los empujaban, en que los golpeaban, pidiéndoles que se fueran. Y a esa foto, que es una fotografía que se ha vuelto muy famosa, de las mujeres donde estaban empujando, agarrándolo así, empujándolo, yo estaba tomando fotos ahí, y bueno, me tocó verlo y tomar la foto, y esa es la historia de la fotografía, ¿no?
Returning to San Cristobal after spending several days in Zapatista autonomous territory was like moving between worlds. In a very real sense, the Zapatistas do not live in Mexico. In fact, in his anniversary speech, Subcomandante Moises referred to outside visitors from other parts of Mexico as foreigners. The Zapatistas see themselves as radically other in relation to mainstream Mexican society. Their mountain strongholds in the highlands of Chiapas are bastions of radical autonomy, which the Mexican state and neoliberal capitalism have not been able to penetrate. And after 30 years, their autonomy still holds strong, though mounting dangers present ever greater challenges to their future. Recent years have brought the Mexican drug war to Chiapas, threatening communities caught in the crossfire. Meanwhile, extractive industries and infrastructure development projects like the Tren Maya threaten the social and ecological integrity of the surrounding region in the name of economic development. The challenge of the Zapatistas today is to navigate a viable course through the choppy waters of the present, resisting external pressures without sacrificing their revolutionary principles. Chiapas remains Mexico's poorest state, and the Zapatista communities remain poor and disadvantaged even by local standards. But they continue to show that they would rather be poor and free than return to the miserable and undignified circumstances under which they lived before the rebellion of 1994. They have made the most of their hard-won freedom, establishing a unique and lasting tradition of autonomy that continues to bear relevance for the indigenous peoples of Mexico, Latin America, and beyond. From the mountains of the Mexican southeast, amid festive music and dance, a cry of resistance went up for the world to hear. Zapata vive, la lucha sigue. Zapata lives, and the fight continues.
That's sick, man. We're so fucked though. Just a brief divergence into Iran here. For those of you who are interested in my opinion on Iran, somebody on Twitter summed it up quite succinctly, which is that if you sincerely believe that this is some kind of organic uprising, not to say that there are some people, or you know, maybe a lot of people who are dissatisfied with the Islamic revolutionary government in Iran. If you sincerely believe this is a mass uprising where people want to bring back the Pahlavis and restore the monarchy, you're a fucking idiot. It's just that's all I have to say. Seriously, shut the fuck up and just use your fucking brain for a second.
Hello and welcome to Dialogue. After 2 weeks unrest, Iran says the situation is now under total control. At the same time, tens of thousands of government supporters took to the streets this week, answering official calls to show solidarity with the state. So what triggered this wave of unrest in the first place? How is the Iranian government responding to mounting economic and social pressure? Amid signals from Washington about backing protesters, where might Iran-US relations go from here? Join us for our discussion today, live from Beijing. I'm Xu Qinduo. Well, joining me today are Professor Shahram Akbazadi, Director of the Middle East Studies Forum at Deakin University, Professor Peter Kuznick, Director of the Nuclear Studies Institution at American University, Professor Wang Jian from Northwest University of China. So, Peter, I will start with you. So, first of all, share with us what's your observation, what specific events or policy decisions in late December that may act as the primary catalyst for the current crisis?
The Iranian people are suffering severe economic depression right now, or very, very difficult conditions. Unemployment is high. Inflation is skyrocketing. We look at the inflation, for example, it's 50% across the board. In areas like food, the prices have gone up 70%. At the same time, the currency has been badly deflated. The currency has dropped, has inflated 80% in the past year. So we're seeing on top of that, the sanctions have bounced back. And in an environment where the government is weakened, and so even though they've just tried to give subsidies to help the poor people out, Pezeshkian has, what's happened now is the middle.
It's got an untold history of the United States facing the camera here. I don't know what that's a Howard Zinn book, along with that director's name, the guy who did Platoon. I have this book. An interesting choice to display to the camera.
Middle class and some elite, part of the elites, have also started to rebel and are very, very upset about the conditions. So it's the overall worsening of the economy combined with a leadership that's morally compromised and losing elements that are supported. So right now, it's very dependent upon the Revolutionary Guard Corps as the backbone of the regime, the only thing they can really count on. And the global situation has gotten worse. So things began to unravel on December 28th, but then on January 8th, the government really cracked down on the protesters. And it was that crackdown that we're witnessing now as the protests have spread across the entire country.
Yes.
And they're involving more parts of the population than we've seen in recent years. So.
Yes, Peter, there are reports of the so-called Bazaar Spark. They say protests began in Tehran's Grand Bazaar, where basically the shoppers, shut their shops because the volatility of the exchange rate of the currency. They say the volatility made it impossible to price goods or secure imports. Why were there so much volatility of the exchange rate of the currencies?
They're very much isolated. Aside from North Korea, it's probably the most isolated regime. They saw what happened to Maduro. They saw what happened to Assad. Trump began threatening them, and the Europeans have also weighed in, as have the Israelis. You had meetings between Netanyahu and Trump, in which they discussed taking action against Iran, which the Israelis have been wanting to do for a long time. And so they feel particularly vulnerable at this point. You've got internal pressure, you've got external pressure, and to put them both together, and the regime is shakier now than it's been since 1979. This is the shakiest moment, and we don't know which direction this is going to go. They're cracking down, strongly repressive, but they're in a very weakened position.
But Peter, does the value of the currency or the economic, with the dire consequences of the economy, does that have something to do with, let's say, the economic sanctions? Either from the snapback mechanism triggered by the European countries last year, and also we know that there is a JCPOA, the deal on the Iranian nuclear program, was reached with the Obama administration, but obviously was abandoned by Trump administration a few years back. So all that contributed to the, let's say, the worsening situation of the economy?
Absolutely. The Iranian government had invested hundreds of billions of dollars or vast amounts into their nuclear program. And then the United States dropped, 15 or so bunker buster bombs on the plants at Fordow and Natanz and Iraq and elsewhere, and pretty much mothballed the nuclear program at the same time that there's sanctions against Iranian oil. And 90% of Iran's oil actually goes to China. But besides that, their oil supplies exports have largely been compromised. And so the economy is very, very feeble at this point. You mentioned the Bazaris. The Bazaar entrepreneurs were instrumental in the revolution in 1979. The fact that they're so actively involved in the protests now just shows how widespread the disillusion is with the government. So you've got a lot of the elites, some of the middle class, the technocrats, a lot of the students. The younger generation is not only facing a lot of unemployment, but also a lot of underemployment. So what we've seen now, people can't afford, there's also on top of that a water shortage, and they can't afford to pay rent. They can't afford health care. Where all these reports about people who used to go and buy a whole chicken now can only afford to buy some small chicken parts. They can't afford beef. So people really are hurting economically in ways that they were not before. And at the same time, the regime is cracking down. Then we've seen them reinforcing the hijab rules, interfering in people's personal lives very, very directly. So it's a combination of a loss of moral authority, economic hardship, a weakened international position in the aftermath of the 12-day war, and seeing their allies collapsing around them. You put that all together, and it's a very, very different position for the government than it's been in before.
Peter, you mentioned about the water crisis. Obviously, there was a drought in the country. For example, reports say the situation in the capital, for example, that the 4 dams, a couple of them, they say they have reached a historic breaking point. Empty reservoirs, according to this satellite images, the 5 main dams supporting Tehran, the capital city of the country, they are at roughly 11 to 13% of the capacity. One of the dam is reportedly currently at only 1% capacity. So without the water, obviously, there's a big problem to people's livelihood. But also, the country partially rely on hydropower for a significant portion of its electricity. So that caused a lot of problems.
A lot of problems. And there's also a narrative that the Revolutionary Guard is diverting the water that is there to support its own businesses. So it's this, on top of the physical reality, there's a narrative spreading of corruption, that the regime is vastly corrupt, that the only ones who are doing well are the Revolutionary Guard and certain businessmen who are tied to the regime, while the rest of the people are suffering. And so, and they actually are suffering at this point in ways that they haven't for a long time. And so it's a situation that really has weakened the moral authority of leaders.
Yeah, the grievances obviously, I mean, are there. I mean, you can see people are not happy with the daily livelihood, and probably not happy with the management of the government, especially the 2026 budget to increase the budget, to increase the taxes. Of course, people are not happy. But what about the accusation of a foreign interference, in particular from Israelis? For example, Mike Pompeo, the former CIA director, former Secretary of State of the U.S., said on the X platform that, quote, "The Happy New Year to every Iranian in the streets, also to every Mossad agents walking beside them." So Mossad agents were with the protesters here?
We know that Mossad is very involved. We know that the Israeli government has been cheering the protesters on, encouraging Donald Trump to bomb again. Trump has been threatening to bomb again. It's interesting. At the same time Trump is destroying democracy in the United States, he's urging them to protest in Iran, where he wanted to shoot protesters in the United States, but he says if the Iranian government shoots the protesters, then the United States is going to intervene militarily. And he's feeling that he can do that. He's feeling empowered after the effort in Venezuela proved so successful. So one of the things the United States can do, we don't know what the United States will do, but the United States can start seizing Iranian oil tankers the same way it seized Venezuelan oil tankers in the Caribbean. The United States could bomb again. There's this narrative that somehow Iran has rebuilt its nuclear programs and is trying to do so, and that the United States and Israel have threatened to start bombing again. And Iran is very vulnerable. They've lost control of the airspace. Their missile defense program is not very successful, and a lot of elements have been defecting who had been loyal before. And Iran has also lost its proxies in the region.
Where is he getting this?
Hamas, Hezbollah, and others have been badly weakened. So the deterrent effect, when Iran threatens to unleash its proxies in the region, that no longer has credibility like it once did. So Iran is threatening to hit U.S. and Israeli assets in the region. But and this does still have a very big missile program. What its capabilities are, we're not sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, now we have Professor Shahram Akbazadi. Welcome to the show, Professor. So we're talking about the Iranian situation. Of course, there's this Trump factor. Inside Iran, there's this palpable fear of a further escalation. Trump's recent statement that the U.S. is locked and loaded to intervene if the government kills protesters, that has created a volatile atmosphere. How do you look at this Trump factor in affecting probably either emboldening some of the protesters or probably the opposite effects on the protest?
Well, thanks for having me. Apologies for a technical glitch. I couldn't join the video. I think all right. The Trump factor is very significant. Obviously, first we have to start by saying that there is a major cross of legitimacy in Iran. There's a big gap between large sections of the population and the ruling regime in Iran. And that crisis of legitimacy has been festering for decades now, and it's getting worse and worse with the failure of the Iranian authorities to provide basic necessities for the population, with the inflation, with the currency going down. Now, Trump has shown that, in a way, he's a man of action, even though it's limited action. So Trump brought the United States into direct war with Iran last year, supporting the Israeli attack on Iran. And now he has said he is going to do it again, to protect the protesters in Tehran and other parts of the country. And that has emboldened many of protesters who've been asking for action, who've been asking for Trump to actually follow through with his promise of decapitating the Iranian leadership, because Trump has already hinted that he could do that, and that's what many protesters are asking for him to do. which is a possibility. Trump is not really a state builder. He doesn't want to engage in a full invasion of Iran to change the regime and build something new, bring democracy. But he.
So there's been this discourse about the Iranian regime. Actually, they've become over the past 15 years quite a lot more moderate than they used to be, with a lot more liberals and reformists allowed to take office in the Iranian parliament. And I got to say that this is what happens. This is what happens when you let liberals take power. And here we have obviously a diaspora Iranian here in Australia. Lovely. Don't really. I'm not sure I. I wouldn't put any money on where this guy is going to go here.
He is prone to surgical actions, like what he did in Venezuela and President Maduro. So,
in other words, what I'm saying is, if you're going to be hardline, if you're going to go against the global order, just go against the global order. Don't let the clutches in, okay? Get the nuclear weapons.
Action means targeting the Iranian leadership and eliminating them. And that Iranian leadership takes that threat.
What kind of politics do I have? I think I'm broadly of the left.
Very seriously. They don't put it past Trump doing something like this. And I think an indication of this is when we look at the Iranian foreign minister reaching out and saying, let's talk to the Trump administration. So despite all the rhetoric of the Iranian leadership fighting the United States and standing up to U.S. bullying and hegemony, when they feel that there is an actual existential threat, they're prepared to talk to the United States.
Okay, they're prepared to talk. I mean, how will the talk, if there's negotiation between the two sides, be different from, let's say, last round of indirect talks between Iran and the U.S. side? Of course, at the last round, right before the last round, the U.S. bombed Iranian nuclear sites. And, how likely is the U.S. to repeat that kind of, raid again?
Yes, well, again, with Trump, everything is always very unpredictable until the last minute. We don't know what he is going to do. But that's a very good question. What is Iran going to offer in negotiations with Trump? Because we know that there are certain red lines. Iran is not going to give up its nuclear program. And I heard the last bit of your other guest presentation about Iran rebuilding its nuclear program. Of course, Iran is rebuilding its nuclear program and reconstructing its facilities.
Yeah, get the nukes. Don't be ambiguous about it. Just get them.
Deeper underground, so they won't be hit by a bunker-busting bomb.
There's a reason they haven't really been able to, there's a reason why North Korea still exists intact and sovereign. There's a reason why probably Israel still exists. There's certainly a reason why why everybody is hugely reluctant to directly attack Russia in any way.
The nuclear program is for civilian use. It may well
Finally,
be
streamer the
for
boss
civilian use, but we don't.
I mean, yeah, there are a lot of people on the left who are kind of mealy-mouthed, like hand-wringy about this kind of thing. I think a lot of them have learned over the past couple of years. I mean, Hassan is a major streamer, and he's always said, just get the nukes. And that's something that I've been saying, to anybody who'll listen for 10 years or so. Just get the fucking nukes.
No, because there are no inspections, there's no international monitoring, and Iran has drawn a red line under its program, so it's not going to give up its nuclear program. Iran has made it very clear it will not give up its missile program. And missile program was shown to be devastating for Israel.
This whole strategy of Iran here, of like trying to engage the West in good faith or whatever, while at the same time building up a conventional security apparatus of its own through assisting regional paramilitaries and conventional arms non-nuclear ballistic missiles and air defenses. I mean, that probably would have worked like 20 years ago, something like that. But you can see the trajectory of the West, that it was a mistake to keep going in this way. And also it was a mistake to insist upon things like wearing the hijab. I don't even know why that's so important to people. Certain aspects of certain hardliners in Iran. Just let that go. Who gives a shit? But get the nukes. Get the nukes, and really, when somebody bites you, break their kneecaps. That's what you have to do.
June last year, when Iran actually managed to hit some Israeli territory with its drones and missiles.
The leftist fraction and people are so diluted to think liberals qualify as the left. Yeah, that's a brain disease primarily in the West, I tend to think. Also, Hassan is one dude. If he did exist, who else on the same scale at this point? There will always be another Asmongold, even Nick Fuentes gaining ground. Yeah, yeah, it's true that Hassan is one dude. But I mean, I could think of others. Mike from PA says get the nukes. Some very tiny streamers who are in my circle all say get the nukes. You'll get, like Dave Legend will say get the nukes. Kairos will say get the nukes. I don't know about many others though. I don't know about many other kind of fairly large political streamers on the left. Mike from PA is probably the second largest one that I can think of. Oh, Nick will say just get the nukes. I'm not sure what Brett's Cinemarx's his opinion is on that. That's really about all I can think of right now.
So Iran is not going to change its political system either. So
None of those people are on the scale of Hassan, by the way. Like, nobody's getting profiles in Variety.
So what
aside from
the
Hassan
authorities in Iran are going to offer at negotiation table to appease Trump?
Right. We have Professor Wang Jin. Wang Jin, if you look at the Israelis, obviously, there's open discussion inside Israel in their media about what they are doing or what they plan to do against Iranians. We understand, of course, they see the Iranians as their threat. So do you think there's a...
I will say that it probably, aside from Hassan, it took a lot of people a long time to come to that conclusion.
So there's a plan between Israel and the U.S., like what they are going to do. Okay, they may repeat the 12-day war against Iran, surgical strikes. Is that all the plan, or are they, prepared for anything? For example, more chaos if they have this some, let's call it Indian.
No, you're right. There are others, and even like a Sam Pepper style guy. I don't know who Sam Pepper is. Style guy would probably say get the nukes, but again, the main political party in America is either right or far right, and the right being far. Oh yeah, as far as mainstream political parties, allegedly from the center left, but are actually center right, no Western political party will openly support the idea of regimes outside of the so-called rules-based order getting nukes. That's just I mean, in the West, certainly, people are brain diseased to think that a bunch of brown people who are yahoos and irrational should be getting nukes. So, yeah, I mean, as far as mainstream politics is concerned, you're 100% true, and nobody's going to say that.
Nearing a regime change in the country. I mean, Iran is a big country.
Well, I think the coordination between the two countries, I mean, Israel and the United States are always on the process. But I don't think they has already been prepared for the possible attacks because we look at the Israeli society, look into the Israeli society, the social atmosphere, social circumstances.
Well, welcome in, by the way, Real Stack Kutyet. I don't know. Real Stack Kutyet? I don't know. I'm trying to gauge what language that is. But welcome in, nice to see you.
It's totally transformed very significantly after the last June, I mean the June of 2025, because inside Israel now the people are more focus upon the upcoming elections, national elections, and focus on the process of the so-called trial against the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So Iran's internal threat, internal unrest is, of course, important, but I don't think Israel has already made the very well preparation for the possible next round of attack directly against the targets inside Iran. And also from the perspective of the United States, as we know that the United States has already expressed that they might launch latest attacks against Iran, and they might launch the attacks very soon. But the problem is that from the military perspective, I don't think the United States has already prepared.
The name is Realist Account Yet. Okay. I'll bear that in mind. Semi-liberal, but is pro-Palestine. Okay. Oh, that's good. That's heartening news. I'm actually happier when there are people who are not liberal or only semi-liberal or pro-Palestine, because that means it's penetrating all sides of the spectrum.
Because we know, for example, there is no United States aircraft carriers in the Persian Gulf. There is no such military and naval forces there. So it makes it very difficult for the possible military attacks, large waves of attack against targets inside Iran. So there may be some kind of many levels of military attacks, many levels of, some levels of the intelligence penetrations inside Iran's territory to launch the strikes, to make a kind of noises and make kind of unrest and crisis. But I don't think Israel and the United States have the capabilities right now to launch large wave of attacks against Iran and launch new wars against Iran.
Wang Jim, the Iranian government has said that now the situation is under total control. The unrest has basically been going on for 2 weeks, so there's a stability. We see this the images of a pro-government rally in the country. So the situation seems to be calming down. But the problems remains. Economic challenges remain there. How will the government handle those challenges? For example, hyperinflation, devaluation of the currency, drought, water crisis, etc.
Well, I think Iran's government has already promised to do something. Some of the old measures, some might be new. For example, the Pezeshkian, the president has already promised to hold dialogues with protesters to hope to listen to their voices and listen to their claims and hope to settle down and sit down and find a way together. And also, on the other hand, Iran has already promised to, for example, offer new subsidies to the civilians, to the daily necessities, to help the people to ease their economic pressure. And also, according to the budget plan just passed by Iran's parliament, that in the upcoming, the upcoming March will be the new budget year, and inside the new budget year, Iran will decrease their tax rate and also offer more subsidies to the people. For example, give them the money directly to help them to meet the family demands. But I don't think these are enough, because as you mentioned, the economic difficulties are there. They are fundamentally resulted from United States sanctions and isolation, and also the measures taken by Iranian government. They have already tried them best, but I don't think this is enough. So for the people, I think their economic situation would be continue to be difficult.
Yeah, to be difficult. Of course, the U.S. sanction, if I'm not wrong, has been decades, sanctions from the U.S. So that obviously produced this very negative effects on people's daily lives. But Peter, President Trump tweeted that on X platform, saying that any country doing business with Iran will be up to 25% tariff when they sell their product to the U.S. or services. How will the U.S. implement those new tariffs, for example, on the partners of Iran, like China, India, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Germany, Iraq? Is he serious?
He's serious. And he said tariff is the most beautiful word in the American lexicon. Trump loves tariffs, as China should know better than anybody.
But what about the deal between China and the U.S. if the U.S. impose extra tariffs? Remember, last time around, there was a truce, temporary maybe, for 1 year.
Why doesn't it let me send the message because it said the I word? I can't see any blocked messages. So this is something purely from Twitch's end. I can't do anything about it. So I can't see what you said. Like, if most critical isn't against something Palestine, anti-Israel. Are you saying Israel? I don't know. There are no rejected messages on my end. So, yeah, it appears to be that because I can't see anything. So Twitch is like, this must be on the Twitch server end, and it's not showing me. Yeah. That's interesting. That's wild. Actually. I wonder if I can say it. Okay. Maybe it's you. Oh, there we go. The most critical is indicated it sounds like any admin if people aren't pro-Palestine. I mean, anybody who's not pro-Palestine now, just speaking to your comment there. It's either because they're oblivious, which a lot of people are, or they just, by default, Westerners just hate Arabs. Like, they just don't mind Arabs being killed. It's like a passive racism. It might have just been an error. I don't know.
Because the U.S. is in need of the Chinese rare earth elements, and the U.S. is actually in a weak position, and now they are imposing extra tariffs. How will that be possible?
Well, you know, Trump's nickname in the United States is Taco, and it stands for Trump always chickens out. And what happened was when China refused to cave, like so many other countries did, and to grovel before Trump and fought back with cuts on the rare earth minerals, the rare earth magnets, Trump had no choice but to cave in on that. So he threatens a lot, but he often then finds a reason to back off. So he can say, well, he was going to put 25% tariffs on China, but China's been helpful on fentanyl. And so we're going to give them 25% credit for helping us there. He doesn't want to get into more of a trade war with China or with India or Brazil. I mean, because it's hurting him domestically. Inflation is still significant here. The price of food and other goods is high. And Trump is very unpopular if you look at the polling in the United States. And so he doesn't, because the tariffs end up being a tax on American consumers. Trump always says, oh, the foreigners are going to pay for it, and we're going to use that money to build up our military and other things. But the reality is that the tariffs are paid by American consumers. So he can threaten. He can bluster, but what he is doing, or he can do, is try to flood the world with oil. Now, Iran has been hurt by a 20% drop in oil prices this year because there's been a glut. That not only hurts Iran, it hurts Russia. In some sense, it helps China because China imports a lot of oil. So while he's gaining things on one hand, he's losing things on the other hand in terms of the broader global picture. And we have to remember that in the mind of Trump and the people around him, the real adversary for the United States, the real competitor, the real enemy is China. And so as Hegseth and others said, we have to end the war in Ukraine. We have to get rid of dealing with Iran so we can focus on the real enemy, China. And the war planning is going on in that regard. And that's really, in some ways, even more alarming than what we're seeing in terms of Iran right now. But Trump is into spectacle rather than nation building, as Juan Jin was saying. So he could try some kind of dramatic strike or a decapitation strike, something that looks good, because he's also doing everything he can to divert from the problems here at home. He wants to, he's managed to get the Epstein files be the lead item on the news,
Well, again, the biggest political party in America at least is apathetic. It couldn't be bothered. Don't forget, 90 million people didn't even vote in the last election. By definition, there were more I didn't show up than any actual candidate. The truth is, when you see the and then they came for poem, that they came for us, it's people not showing up for the call to action. I mean, I think that was, talking about the last election, I think that was a very deliberate abstinence from the vote. People who did not like either candidate. Certainly a protest vote against the Democrats for refusing to, and actually sending people to Dearborn, like the Clintons, to be like, no, fuck you, actually, we have to kill more Palestinians. Like, basically, we should do it because it's correct and right. And so people just didn't vote for either party. which is a position. I'm not going to vote on. I'm not going to comment on internal American politics. Myself, I'm not going to urge people to. I don't urge people to vote any particular way. I can say that if it were me, I also wouldn't have voted. I probably would have voted for the Greens, and I know that a lot of people have a problem with the Greens. I don't give a shit. Shut the fuck up. Like in this field of people, just I'll vote for the Greens. I don't care. Like if I'm going to participate in electoralism, I'll vote for the Greens. And shut up. I know that she turns up every 4 years, blah 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 blah. But the fact is that her positions on paper and the ones she's spoken are much better than anybody else's. So, don't quote marks at me about it. All right. Because either way, the genocide would have continued, and in fact, probably would have gotten less. I'm willing to bet we would have gotten less under a Kamala Harris presidency. Overall, it's been nothing, but we would have gotten less than nothing from the Democrats.
Hardships that Americans are facing, or the ice.
We would have gotten some nice things that they say. Like, oh, Kamala Harris is feeling very bad for the Palestinians. But we're still going to send the billions of weapons. We'll do anything they say.
In the streets, or the killing of American citizens, that focus instead on what's happening in Iran. And so that's part of the Trump strategy right now. So he's capable.
And also, as an addendum to that, I should say that if, once again, one of the reasons why I vote, because if you feel that your own situation, whether it's an economic situation, LGBTQ situation, if you feel that voting for Democrat, this is why I can't fault people for voting for their own interest here.
Of doing a one-off kind of hit, a decapitation strike, if he could pull it off.
Yeah, Wang Jin, briefly, the Chinese response to the situation is that the foreign ministry said, it hopes Iran's government and people can overcome the current difficulties and maintain national stability. Should that be the right policy, probably, from the outside world toward Iran? 30 seconds.
I think it's the best way. I think just the best way, because we know these difficulties, both from Iranian government for the search of stability and the people for the search of a better economic situation. But the only way should be dialogue, and through dialogue to settle down the division.
With that, we are coming to the end for today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.
There were actual protest votes, but a lot of that 90 million was people saying it makes no difference. The biggest thing is there was no voter activation. You can't have Liz Cheney for the Democrats, even though I can't name Kamala's policies beyond that. Some small business loans. Yeah, I don't know what the fuck she was talking about, honestly. Are you American? Realist account yet? Are you one of our cousins from the North Atlantic? So we're going to look at Randa Abdel Fattah now, the cancellation from the Adelaide Writers' Week.
Hello, and welcome to We Used to Be Journos. It's usually the podcast where two media insiders break down broken news.
No subtitles.
But today is going to be a slightly different episode. My name is Jan Fran. You probably already know that.
This is a really good podcast, by the way. This is at Media. If you're not already aware, I live in Australia. I know that all of us hate journalists, that we hate journalists really across the board. It's true that in the Western world, journalism has never been... mainstream journalism has never been at a lower ebb. The quality of these people is just the pits. They don't know anything. They don't care about anything. And they're just probably some of the worst people on earth. Although, independent journalists, the quality is, up there these days. So, but I would say that Australia is the worst. Australia has the worst journalists. the worst mainstream media you've ever seen. Just absolute droolers. Just people who don't know anything about anything at all. Just the worst sorts of people. So I forgot what her name is here. She's a former professional journalist who has a podcast called We Were Journalist, which, you know, what an appropriate name. I'm going to shoot through this because I'm getting tired.
Is going to be a slightly different episode. My name is Jan Fran. You probably already know that. My co-host is Antoinette Latouf. She is...
You're the dumbest person. You're like, Trump said groceries is cheaper now. Also, I'm sadly American in Minnesota. Oh, you're in Minnesota. Wow. There's been a lot happening, apparently. What happened in Iran can also happen in the West in an Exeter. I don't know if it is rapid as attract and disrupt. I think it's the Western states aren't molded. Sure, I don't. Hello, Grand Designs enjoyer. I don't disagree.
Not here because she is recovering from major surgery. She's currently on the couch watching Emily in Paris, even though she's supposed to be preparing for our live show. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, boys and girls, it's happening the 1st, 2nd, 3rd and 4th of February in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Canberra. It's coming up. It's very soon. So if you have not bought your tickets for our live show, I'm going to be including all of the info that you need to know in the show notes and also on our various social media platforms. You can find the link in the bio. Tickets are almost sold, I think. I'm pretty happy with how they're going, so you might have to, you know, put up with a seat at the back, but I would highly encourage you to do that.
Jan Fran is her name.
Also attempting some kind of recovery on a couch somewhere, that's a terrible segue and I apologise, is the Adelaide Writers' Festival. Which has somewhat imploded, if we can call it that, after the board cancelled the appearance of Palestinian academic Dr. Randa Abdel Fattah. Randa was supposed to appear at the Adelaide Writers' Festival. The statement that the board issued, which I'm sure a lot of you will have been across now, so I'm not going to go into huge detail about it, but basically claimed that it would be culturally insensitive to program Randa so soon after the Bondi massacre. It also included this little doozy of a paragraph. While we do not suggest in any way that Dr. Randa Abdel Fattah or her writing have any connection to the tragedy at Bondi, which I read that and I thought, yeah, it does sound like you are suggesting that though, just quietly. It was an extraordinary statement and it has, you know, it's an unprecedented move as far as I can remember happening in any writers' festival, really. Also extraordinary is the fact that at the time of recording, there's been around 100 writers/participants that have withdrawn. I was going to say they've withdrawn in solidarity with Randa, but there's been various reasons for their withdrawals. We'll get into that. The chair of the board has resigned. 3 board members have resigned. Festival director Louise Adler has resigned, and Randa herself has issued a legal notice, essentially putting the festival's board on notice that legal proceedings could be coming up in the not too distant future. Of course, hot takes abound. Everybody has an opinion about what has happened and an opinion about the woman at the centre of all of this, Dr. Randa Abdel Fattah herself. And so today's episode is going to be a chat with Randa. She's agreed very graciously to join us and to talk through all of this, what it's like to be at the centre of it, to talk through the fallout, the media's role in it, and to try and unpack this. We're going to do it together. So, Randa, thank you very much for joining us on We Used to Be Journos.
Thanks for having me, Jan.
I guess I'm going to start by asking it's a fairly redundant question, and anybody that's been listening to our podcast knows that I actually don't really ask it very often. I ask it.
Do you know if there are Oz people who leave Oz because of the authoritarian neoliberal regime? Australians are very quiet about suffering. We have a very high homelessness rate. Last I checked, actually, our homelessness rate is higher in proportion to our population than even the United States. But people keep it quiet. They just go live in cars, live in vans, and park somewhere. They live in friends, families, living rooms. It's quite a hush-hush thing. Australians tend to keep things quiet. So if they do leave, it wouldn't be widely publicized, and certainly most media outlets here would not be keen to publicize that fact. There have been large, what I want to say here, notable personalities, notable public personalities who have left the country. I'm specifically thinking of one, Yasmin Abdul Majid, who was hounded out of the country. She went and left she went and lived in. She still lives in England actually, because she was racially hounded for being a Muslim who dared say, "Think about the people in the Middle East" during one of our Memorial Days, Anzac Days. And she's apparently still quite traumatized by it, and she's probably never coming back. I can tell you that I'm looking to leave this country for a couple of reasons. One, because quite frankly, the cost of living in this country, the cost of rent, I'm actually being priced out entirely. So it's either be homeless or move back to my mother's home country. And I should say that I'm not at all sad about it, because I think it is becoming politically dangerous to be somebody like me with my views in this country. You can be just detained for a long time. Court proceedings can be brought against you. It's the usual Zionist kind of playbook where even if they don't expect to get an actual conviction, they can tie you up in court and have you detained for long periods until it's just mentally just too much. So, and aside from that, I do think that the Western world just doesn't like people like me anymore. I've come to a Clarence Thomas kind of realization in my life that men are people. People in the, men are being Middle East, North Africa, are quite simply not liked. In the West, they're not wanted. We're always going to be hated. We're always going to be othered. The outgroup homogeneity effect. And quite simply, my advice to every MENA person is to get out of the West. Go back to essentially wherever you came from. And I say that in a friendly way. Or if you can't go to where you came from because it's been fucked up by the West, find somewhere else. Countries broadly from the Islamic world are quite accepting of people from similar backgrounds who are fleeing due to hardship. Get out. Disengagement is the only way forward. Westerners will always fucking hate us. All right? And it's a strategic reason, because control over the meta region is needed strategically to control energy and resources to maintain Western imperial hegemony. When I say Western, I mean mostly the United States, but with their little lapdogs, such as this country, Australia, Britain, the pathetic Europeans, at their heels. So, we should leave. Disengagement. Cut them off. And by the way, when that happens, get the fuck out of our countries, please. And we'll see who really thirsts for resources after that. Bearing in mind, Europe has nothing except a financial sector. So, that's honestly what I advocate. This is Clarence Thomas was right.
Version of it. I was going to ask, how are you? But instead of asking, how are you, I might ask, what are you out of 10 today?
What does 10 represent? Good?
Yeah, 10 is good. 10 is good. 1 is terrible. 10 is good. Where are you on that spectrum right now?
Right now, wow. If my dad was in the room, he would say, Yaranda, remember Gaza. And I would have to say 10. I'm okay, Dad, it's 10. That's the measure. Spiritually, that's how I think of things. No matter what we go through here as Palestinians, I am not losing.
Omar Sakar, who is a poet here, who is also being cancelled for various events, brought up this point, which is various people with, substantial public profiles in the arts, one after the other has been cancelled. So we have Randa Abdul Fattah cancelled from the Adelaide Writers' Festival. We have another fellow, I don't really know much about the art world, so forgive me that I forgot his name, but he's a well-known sculptor, like he does, and also video art. So he does a lot of video art and sculptures. He was a Lebanese Australian guy, and he included I can't remember exactly who. I think he was a senior figure from Hezbollah in one of his art installations. So he was cancelled. He was talked about in Parliament. All these people were talked about in Parliament. We have Yasmin Abdul Magid, the engineer former Young Australian of the Year who was hounded out of this country. We have Antoinette Lattouf, another Lebanese Australian who was fired from the ABC from her temp job. One after the other. And the thing is that all these people just happen to be Arabs. And yet we have an anti-Semitism Royal Commission in this country. You know, I would remind you that 51 people were murdered in Christchurch in 2 mosques by an Australian. There's no talk about a Royal Commission for that. In fact, I can tell you for a fact that in this country, the Muslim community really don't like it when even there is some kind of sympathetic initiative, because they just don't want any attention drawn to themselves. Such is the mauling that the MENA community has received post 9/11. Day after day, they don't even want any attention drawn to themselves. Even if it's well-meaning, most of them are just like, no, I don't want to, just forget about it. We'll live. That's what it's like here, right? Which is why it's not the major reason why I'm leaving this country, but it is about 35 to 40% of the reason why I'm leaving this country and moving back to my own homelands. I mean, I'm done. I'm just done with the West.
Losing sight of the bigger picture here, and that I'm part of
I'll be
bigger
right back.
movement, and it speaks to our power actually when they attack us in this way, and I have to keep remembering that. Of course, it's difficult, it's fatiguing, it's school holidays, I'm a mother as well, but I'm not going to play the pity game here. I'm going to embrace this moment and do this for my people, and because it's the right thing to do, but of course it's hard and exhausting.
You know, I'm so glad that you brought Gaza up so early on in our discussion, because I feel like it's something that in the discussion of all of this has been so lost, and I want to make sure that that's not the case here. So indeed, a very good perspective, I guess, to move forward with. You've issued a legal statement. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that? What is that? What does that entail, and what do you plan to do moving forward here?
Yeah, so I did seek legal advice. As you know, probably this isn't my first rodeo when it comes to attacks on me, character assassinations, attempts to deplatform me, to get me fired, to have my Australian Research Council grant cancelled. And as you know, taking legal action and our legal sort of avenues, it's never about whether you're in the right. It's about whether you're well-resourced. It's about whether you have the appetite to go through the lawfare that the lobby is going to put you through. But in this instance, I felt quite strongly that, like you said, this was unprecedented. A line had been completely crossed, and so I sought legal advice, and my lawyers are now looking into my options. That's as much as I can say.
Yeah. When you say that a line has been completely crossed, can you elaborate about that for us? I feel like I have an idea of what you're going to say, but I'd like to hear it from you.
Yeah, I mean, I've been cancelled from festivals before. It happened with Bendigo just a few months ago. I'm very well aware of the way that institutions sort of leverage policy language and diversity, and inclusion and free speech and weaponize it against us, actually, to silence our voices. And they can do that in very blunt ways. They can do it in very clever ways. But in this instance, astonishingly, they didn't even use the veneer of those sorts of usual excuses. The letter that I received in an email on Thursday morning simply used the excuse of cultural sensitivity in the wake of Bondi to deplatform and disinvite me. There was no mention of past statements, which was sort of retrospectively applied in the statement that was published online. And so that for me was actually unprecedented in the blatancy and shamelessness of the anti-Palestinian racism.
I mean, there's a sense of deja vu here, because this has happened at the Bendigo Writers' Festival in August of last year. For those who don't know, Quick BG, you and others, so it wasn't just you, that's a key difference, you and others were asked to sign a code of conduct and told essentially not to talk about, things that might be controversial or divisive. Everybody kind of read that for what it was, which is please do not talk about Gaza. Authors walked and the festival essentially collapsed. Do you think that the kind of backlash to institutions caving to this outside pressure, does it seem sort of predictable now, or are we in this, space where the...
And by the way, I got to say that if you're a white leftist, go to Asia, because it's not going to be good for you either. My beautiful white allies. I kind of like white people. Most of my friends are white. I enjoy that turnaround in the locution. I have a lot of white friends. Okay, just leave the United States, leave Australia. Not going to be good for you either. You can be turned into a default brown person in a second. You can be shot in the face 3 times in Minnesota and immediately otherized. So at this point, the battle's lost. especially since the left in the West has seen fit to be weirdly anti-gun. I mean, I understand why, but at the same time, that was very stupid. That was very dumb.
Bondi.
And if you insist on staying in these hellholes, buy a weapon, buy a firearm, and learn how to use it responsibly.
Attack on the Hanukkah event has sort of changed things.
I advocate for the breaking up Oz, most European countries, US, and most of the world. I see as a nation state with toxic failure. Yeah, I mean, certainly the United States should be broken up. I apologize to my American friends. Australia should be broken up, definitely. Or at least line back movement, given full precedence in the Constitution. Germany should be broken up. Fuck that. Back to the Napoleonic states for Germany.
Yeah, I mean, like with Bendigo, what's interesting is that actually the code of conduct was issued specifically because of me. So Freedom of Information documents and ABC reporting on this has revealed that actually the code of conduct was shared with everybody as a sort of a cover-up, a way to cover up the fact that initially they only wanted to send it to my session. They only wanted to send it to me, the only Palestinian. And somebody tapped them on the shoulder and said, well, that's not really a good idea. And so in an attempt to cover up that blatant sort of targeting of the only Palestinian at that festival, they sent it to everybody. At that time we were saying, haven't they learned from Antoinette Latouffe's case? So like each time this happens, people are citing the case before to say, well, haven't they learned their lesson? And institutions are still not learning their lesson. But what's happened now post-Bondi, I think, is quite clear. It's the sense of entitlement to completely politicize that atrocity, that terrorist event. And I think an overreach. They completely underestimated that the writing community and the public would see through that really despicable attempt to capitalize and opportunistically capitalize on people's grief over what had happened, and to use anti-Semitism as a way to perpetuate anti-Palestinian racism. So I think we are moving now in a different direction. I think it remains to be seen whether other institutions are going to use this as an example of what not to do, or whether they are actually going to be emboldened by this.
Mm-hmm. I think it was, just to be a stickler, I think it was Deep Cut that broke the story about the Bendigo Festival actually being about you specifically.
Yes, shout out to Deep Cut, that's true. It's very important.
They listen to this and go, it was us. He didn't say anything.
And ABC actually pretended that they broke it, but it was Deep Cut.
It was Deep Cut, indeed. Yeah, I mean, just back to the kind of like unprecedented nature of all of this. Did you expect this many authors to
I'm
pull
100%
out?
pro-gun. I think we have so many dangerous right-wing gangs and movements like the Patriot Front as a opponent of them.
First
There's no
Nations
justification to
writers are
advocate
always
gun
the
control.
first to show
Yeah.
leadership, and they all pulled out without hesitation and in solidarity.
I feel like I should shout out right now the Socialist Rifle Association. There's also a Liberal Rifle Association. Forgot what their name is. There's also the John Brown Gun Club. So if you are in one of the states where any of those associations are present, go to them, get advice, learn how to use a weapon responsibly.
With me, I didn't expect that kind of a response at all. And you alluded to it in your introduction that not everybody pulled out in solidarity with me, and I think it's an important conversation that we have. But no, there is no way that I expected this many people to do it. But I do think that it is extremely naive that the board could have thought that they wouldn't have done some kind of irreparable harm to the festival. I don't think they could have anticipated that it would go this way. But yeah, it has taken me completely by surprise. It's galvanizing. It's invigorating to see this level of support. It's also heartbreaking to see how institutions like run by these feckless managers are so prepared to decimate and destroy, and all the sort of livelihoods at stake, a festival completely in tatters. And it would be remiss of me not to say, the resignation of Louise Adler, who I have just such enormous respect and love for, and what this has cost her as well.
Well, it's interesting that you bring Louise up, because
thanks
she
for the
has
follow.
resigned.
Friend Designs of Joy, I appreciate
and in
it.
doing so has written this piece for The Guardian. Now, Louise is a Jewish woman. She's been in the arts, she's a stalwart of the arts. She's been critical of Israel's genocide for a long time. And her article in The Guardian, I just want to read you a few statements of it. I'm sure that you've already read it, just to sort of get your thoughts. But she says, the new mantra, Bondi changed everything, has offered this lobby, she's talking about the pro-Israel lobby, its stenographers in the media and a spineless political class, yet another coercive weapon. Hence, in 2026, the board, in an atmosphere of intense political pressure, has issued an edict that an author is to be cancelled. And she's also written, we need writers now more than ever as our media closes up, as our politicians grow daily more cowed by real power, and as Australia grows more unjust and unequal. I'm curious as to
That is
how you...
That is a signal statement, by the way. So Louise Adler, she's a member of the Australian Jewish Council. the Australian Jewish Council has been steadfastly pro-Palestine and anti-Zionist, basically. And time after time, Louise Adler's status as a Jewish person, even though the what's it called here? What should I call it? I don't know what to call it. I keep thinking Staatsräson, which is the reason for state. German. But the kind of the principle of the day in this country is like anti-Semitism, right? But very public figures who are Jewish but pro-Palestine and in support of people like Randa Abdel Fattah are stripped of their Jewishness in public, which is a very interesting phenomenon to see. So, and so Louise Adler, who's the director of the Adelaide Writers' Festival, right? She was always in support of Randa Abdel Fattah appearing at the Adelaide Writers' Festival, and she was criticized roundly by Rupert Murdoch-owned mastheads here in this country, while stripping out. I mean, it's notable in that they never mention that she's Jewish, because they will always mention that somebody is Jewish if they are opposed, if they are in opposition. But if they're for, suddenly they're not Jewish anymore, which is an interesting, it's an interesting dynamic that a bunch of Anglo-Saxons get to decide who's Jewish or not.
It's stenographers in the media and a spineless political class, yet another coercive...
It's not a spineless political class, by the way. The fact that there is anti-Palestinian and, broadly speaking, anti-Arab hatred in this country is a deliberate strategy. Because as a sub-imperial power under the United States, it is in Australia's strategic interest to make it clear to people that certain kinds of people are not really quite human. It's acceptable to kill them. It's acceptable to destroy their neighborhoods, their businesses, their countries, and kill them, and kill their children, right? It's acceptable to do that. It doesn't really matter. And that region is the MENA region. And they're doing it now to South Americans in the United States. I mean, you're seeing it. The same strategies are being employed to dehumanize those people. It's very much deliberate. It's not because they're spineless or stupid. It's because they want to do it.
Weapon. Hence, in 2026, the board, in an atmosphere of intense political pressure, has issued an edict that...
Have you covered the new authoritarian laws of the ruling party? Yeah, I haven't yet, because a lot of people are still doing... I don't have the patience to pour through it myself. I think Michael West Media will probably come up with something in a day or two, and I'll cover it secondhand because I'm a lazy cunt.
An author is to be cancelled. And she's also written...
I am vaguely aware, yeah. I mean, the broad... I've read some of the pertinent sections of that law, of the legislation they're intending to pass, which, by the way, they've only given 48 hours for the public to read through. And yeah, it does seem apparent that they're trying to essentially criminalize criticism of Israel, because it makes a certain proportion of Jewish people uncomfortable.
We need writers now more than ever as our media closes up, as our politicians grow daily more cowed by real power, and as Australia grows more unjust and unequal. I'm curious as to how you have taken in...
I mean, this is a signal comment here.
Of intense political pressure, has issued an edict that an author is to be cancelled. And she's also written, we need writers now more than ever as our media closes up, as our politicians grow daily more cowed by real power, and as Australia grows more unjust and unequal.
I don't recall a statement like that made by a public figure about this country, ever. And I've been paying attention to politics for a very long time. Right? the idea that Australia, this is a national fiction that we enjoy, that we're very laid back, we're very relaxed, that Australians are very anti-authoritarian. The opposite couldn't be, it couldn't be more untrue. The opposite is the reality. Actually, Australians are some of the most subservient to power, the most non-rock-the-boat people you've ever seen, way more than Americans. Americans at least resist this kind of stuff. There are movements there, many of them. People speak out about it. In Australia, it's not like that. It's not like that at all. People here are very much go along to get along. And we also don't have the same kind of, we don't have a Bill of Rights, really. We have some constitutional protections that are based upon a body of law, like a body of law that it kind of follows the British system where judgments become pro forma part of the Constitution. So we have kind of constitutional protections, but nothing formalized, nothing set in stone, no Bill of Rights, nothing that lays out you absolutely have these rights. So any kinds of rights about freedom of speech, the freedom of speech clauses that we have in our Constitution, we have one, which two major ones are kind of a broad freedom of expression thing, which if the government was so inclined, you could legislate specifics into it, right? So it's not a broad, it's not like an across-the-board protection of freedom of expression at all. The other one is just freedom of trade between the states, which is just an artifact of when Australia first became a country where the states were a lot more separate. So there was a lot more friction about trade between the states. So that's irrelevant now. Signal comment. It means it's an important comment to make. It's not just important. Important doesn't really cover it. It's I can't really think right now. I can't think of any other synonyms. It's a profound sort of comment to make.
I'm curious as to how you have taken in that statement, what your response to it is.
Yeah, I mean, I've known Louise for many years, and she's always been just so passionate and so principled and so ethical and so moral in her stance and in her commitment to platforming all voices, especially marginalised voices. This is very much in line with her principled stance over many years. I feel that what she has done here is really identify what is at stake. And how scary it is for our future here. I mean, the marginalisation and suppression and censorship of minority voices is something that is obvious on a settler colony like Australia, which is structured around white supremacy, and we are always going to be the uncomfortable voices that challenge power. But what we are seeing, as she said, is the politicisation of this moment of Bondi, and it's being used now to really carry out the wishes of a lobby so that all kind of silencing now is going to be acceptable. And as I say, and so many of us say, if Palestinians don't get freedom of speech, nobody's going to get it. If Palestinians don't get academic freedom, nobody's going to get it. So they might start with Palestinians now, but rest assured that it's going to come after any group that challenges power and challenges the elites. And we're seeing that happen now. And I think that's why so many people walked from the festival, because they could see that this was a cautionary tale.
I just want to linger on the point of, the point that you made, which is like this is institutions sort of bowing to lobby pressure, and the idea of that cultural sensitivity. Louise herself is Jewish. She's the one that invited you, or at least people like the auspices invited you to be part of the festival. I know that the Jewish Council had put out a statement as well, strongly condemning, I think it was in the strongest possible terms, what the board has done. And so you have a Jewish woman essentially, supporting you, the Jewish Council supporting you. And so my question is, what do they mean when they say cultural sensitivities? What does that mean? How do you reflect on that?
It drives me wild, because what we are actually seeing here is how Zionism is the agent of anti-Semitism, how Zionism erases anti-Zionist Jewish identity, their right to speak, their right to claim their Jewish identity. I mean, Louise is the daughter of Holocaust survivors. Her Jewish identity has been...
It's It's perhaps appropriate here to note that the earliest anti-Zionists were Jews. When Zionism was broached as a kind of an identity, as a movement, most Jews opposed it, especially the ones outside of Europe, because they were like, we're fine. I don't know what you're talking about. This sounds shitty. We don't want to participate in ethnic cleansing of Palestine or any other country. That sounds gross. What are you talking about?
Completely erased here. She's almost being positioned as an alibi to Palestinians and framed as a threat, therefore, to all Jews. In the statement, there was, a reference to this being a time of mourning. Obviously, I am sitting outside of that group who is mourning what has happened, the implication of that statement. Okay, fine. As a Palestinian, that's the kind of imputation they want to make about me. But what does it say about Louise, the director, the Jewish director of this festival? It implies that she is also not in mourning in inviting a Palestinian writer. I mean, there are so many layers of violence that have been enacted by this decision on Palestinians, on First Nations people, on minority writers, but also on a Jewish woman at the center of it.
One of the things that I found incredibly frustrating was in the statement, among many things, was the fact that they said that due to your past statements, it would be culturally insensitive to platform you at this time. But they didn't give an indication of what any of your past statements were. And what that has done, it has led to the media, essentially, media and commentariat, however you want to call it, essentially just being given free rein to speculate. So I guess in your opinion, I mean, what role do you think the media, if we can term them as a homogenous entity, which it's not, but I mean, what role do you think it's played in sort of aiding these attacks on individuals and arts institutions?
Yeah, I mean, like the way that mainstream, we call it mainstream imperial media, as Amy McQuire calls it, have jumped on that bandwagon and sort of trawled up past statements and social media posts without context, without ever allowing for any opportunity for me to explain them. But also, I'm at a point now where I feel, why should I explain them? People who are incensed about certain posts that I made have never ever bothered to show any sort of attention, pay any sort of attention, or show any kind of outrage about a live stream genocide. Why is it that I called for the end of a settler colony? And I remember in one tweet that they are so ropeable about, I was actually quote tweeting 3 Palestinian babies who had frozen to death on Boxing Day, and a Palestinian journalist who was standing outside a hospital as his wife was in labor, who was killed in an Israeli airstrike as he was waiting for his child to be born. That is completely ignored. It's just my quote, that in my tweet, that is the problem, which shows you that they are morally bankrupt. And I refuse to justify or explain myself to people who have no moral compass. I will not answer to them. I will not explain or justify why I said those comments. They should be more outraged by what we are fighting against, a genocide, than the way that I happen to express myself. I won't be tone policed. I won't have the outrage mob deny me my rage and my grief.
Yeah, I find in all of this, it's exactly as you said and exactly what I said at the top of the interview, which is that there is a live stream genocide that we've been watching on our phone for 2 years. And I have found that to be completely absent from the discourse. And of course, as somebody who's sat here and seen just the most unspeakable horrors live streamed on our phone for the last 2 years, for me, that is so front and center of my mind. And to see it just completely erased from any type of kind of discourse, this idea that, people are just anti-Semitic. People just don't like the state of Israel. People have said terrible things about X, Y, and Z. It's like that the personification.
Can I just say that there is nothing wrong with just not liking the state of Israel? There's nothing about it to like.
Terrible things about X, Y, and Z. It's like that the personification of you were quote tweeting and they just left out that bit and used just the quote of your tweet. It has sort of just been writ large in our media, and that has made me feel like I'm going crazy.
Absolutely. Even now, like in the cycle of this kind of moment of crisis and controversy, where I'm having to, respond to these sorts of allegations about anti-Semitic attacks, and I'm reading all the garbage that's being printed by those justifying my, cancellation, calling me an anti-Semite and hateful. At the same time that I am sharing content about Israel bombing Lebanon, at the same time as Israel is breaching the so-called ceasefire to kill 5 Palestinian children, at the same time that we are seeing Palestinians remain slaughtered and under and besieged and drowning in tents and freezing to death. A 1-week-old baby froze to death 2 days ago. And I'm sitting there reading material about me
that's
being
not the first or the
and
last.
So it's this it feels dystopian. It feels like every teenage novel that you read about the world going inside out. I feel like I'm going crazy. The insanity of this moment, and that speaks to you about the power of their propaganda. That they can even reframe this entire controversy so that it's about me, my morality, and my ethics, and my conduct, and not their hate and the state that they are justifying and defending.
You mentioned at the top, I think we were chatting, and you said that this is not your first rodeo, so to speak. It's something that you've kind of been fighting for the last 2 years. Can you talk us through some of the things that you have been fighting for the last 2 years? The one that pops to my mind is obviously your Australian Research Council grant with Macquarie University. Yeah, so actually it all really started to escalate in March 2024 because of the cancellation of other artists from the State Library of Victoria on the grounds of cultural safety and sensitivity and child safety. I mean, again, they just throw these massive accusations that speak to people's character that are so defamatory that they just throw these words around. And so I posted in relation to that, this way that safety and feelings are weaponized. People are not distinguishing between feelings and facts on the ground, for goodness sake. And so that led to a massive coordinated campaign by Murdoch Media, pro-Israel lobby groups, and the coalition. And it started from there. We need her ARC grant to be cancelled. She needs to be fired. And so that just continued. And, it's a very well-oiled machine. And then when I spoke at an anti-racism symposium organised and led by the Karumba Institute, a First Nations-led institute in Mianjin, and I was speaking about decolonising knowledge. So as an academic in universities, how do I try to bridge the gap?
Mianjin, she said. So where there's like a... we have there's an ongoing, and I'm a little bit embarrassed because I don't know them. I only know Boorloo, which is Perth. So we're in kind of, I don't know, more woke circles. There's an effort to refer to place names by their original First Nations names. I really only know where I live, Boorloo, which is Perth. Mianjin is Brisbane. So that's the Indigenous Australian word name for Brisbane, Mianjin. And here in Perth, it's Boorloo. So
between the ivory tower of academia and grassroots, communities. I don't want to be that academic.
This is one of the woke movements that I'm all for, by the way. By the way, in Australia, apparently we have 6 seasons according to the Indigenous communities, which makes way more sense. And I also don't remember what they're called. But yeah, I will be making the effort in future to learn Indigenous place names and Indigenous seasonal names because they are better. They also sound cooler.
Who sits and writes papers that 5 people read. I want to be an academic who produces knowledge that actually means something, contributes to the world, speaks with my community, not to them. And in that I was talking about...
What does she mean, decolonize knowledge? It means that a lot of world history, as we're taught today, has been taught primarily from the point of view of Western academics and writers. And I mean, that needn't necessarily be automatically a bad thing. But it is worth noting that there's a whole body of history from the same time, like from the Enlightenment, well, from modern times back, but especially like the body of writing from the Enlightenment period. That's the European Enlightenment, but the Eastern world was already kind of enlightened. There's a whole body of work, copious amounts of work. They've been writing about history, about events for thousands of years before people in Europe had figured out that you can bathe. So it's kind of like, so what she means by decolonize is that we're looking at knowledge from the point of view of Easterners and also the West. It's also worthy. They're equally worthy, but you should be looking at that whole body of work. So to decolonize knowledge, so that it comes from people who have been colonized as well, who have been writing their own histories for a very long time.
Bending the rules of knowledge production, bending the rules and conventions. Well, that was just enough for Murdoch Media and their cronies to spin it as somehow a confession. I mean, if I was doing that, would I be so stupid to say that out loud? That I was bending the funding rules, which led to a 10-month, really, really detailed investigation. And I'm glad it was, in which I was completely vindicated. And
in her context, when she says bending the rules, she's talking about how Western universities will impose certain rules which are, in the way they're constructed, tend to exclude Eastern accounts or Indigenous accounts of their own histories. and, various world events and just ideas. So in order to do that, you have to bend rules a little bit. That's what she's talking about in this context.
It's still not enough. I think they're so pissed off that I came out of that and have retained my fellowship.
Bareback.
And I just hope people can see through this, because they expose themselves time and time again. They want our necks, and the more we refuse, the harder they come at us.
What do you think it is about you in particular? Because it seems that everywhere you go, there is some kind of concerted effort, whether it is successful or not, whether it is a minor thing or a major thing, there is some kind of concerted effort to have you removed from whatever bill you end up on. Do you think that there is something particular about you, or do you think this happens to everybody? And if it is particular about you, what do you think it is?
Look, I think when you look at the way the Hasbara machine works and the way the lobbying works, not just here in Australia, but in the US and the UK, there's the cautionary tale. So they'll pick off the public figures as a warning shot to those who might not have the social media platform or the public profile to be able to weather the storm and to be able to gather, to be able to really have the community support behind them because they have a low profile. And so it's like a warning shot. If you take those down, then the message will be clear to others. Keep quiet, or this will happen to you. It was happening to me before October. My Q&A appearances, there were always complaints and coordinated attacks. My understanding of why it has changed is because prior to October 7, we haven't changed our critique of Israel. We have always known it has been a violent settler colony that is killing Palestinians, stealing their land, committing apartheid. We've always said that. This year will be 78 years. After October 7, the fact that this was now live streamed and the fact that a global movement of solidarity emerged meant Israel could no longer deny it. Israel could no longer just debate this in polite society. The evidence of our eyes was telling us what was happening. And so the only option they have is silence. Just crush all voices, because we can't fight what people can see with their eyes. So we're going to shut their voices down. And as you can probably tell, like you and Antoinette, I don't shut up. And so this is probably the reason why they're coming after me.
I know you said you don't really want to explain yourself to people, but I wouldn't mind kind of just unpacking this, because one of the things that again, it wasn't in the statement, it was just media speculation, but I think a lot of people will have seen it and will have read this, is that, the main gripe that people seem to have with you is this idea where you said that Zionists should not be entitled to cultural safety. So two things. Yeah. Can you give us the context that was in? Because clearly it's a statement that has been pulled from somewhere.
Yeah.
And two, what did you actually mean by that?
I have no problem talking about this with you, because it's not an interrogation by somebody who hasn't had a moral compass for the last 2 years. So that I'm happy. I welcome the opportunity to explain it. Again, it was in the context of in March 2024, the State Library cancelled a group of poets and authors, including Omar Sakr. And the reason they cited was that it would be a threat to cultural safety and child safety and sensitivities. And so I subtweeted about that. Oh, sorry. Rewind. Also, the popular Adelaide Festival, which is very uncanny that we're talking about it now, disinvited a Palestinian DJ band, and again citing reasons of cultural.
It wasn't a band.
Safety.
I know who she's talking about here. She's talking about Sama Abdul Hada, who is a Palestinian DJ because I listen to techno, like proper techno, whom I love, by the way. Great DJ, a wonderful person by all accounts, who runs wonderful dance festivals she did anyway, before they would be probably machine gunned by the IDF now, the IOF. Sama Abdul Hadi. She's wonderful, and they're going to... I was happy that she was... there's no chance that I would be able to fly over to see her, but I was happy that she was coming here, and they're going to cancel her now, and it makes me particularly sad and angry.
And so my tweet was about this, was in direct response to that. There is a distinction. First of all, I'll rewind. Cultural safety does not mean physical safety. Cultural safety is not something that is afforded to political ideologies. It's something afforded to racial and ethnic minorities. It actually comes from Maori indigenous health literature, and it's about creating safe environments for historically racially marginalized peoples. So it is something that applies to racial minorities. It is not something that can be used by a settler colonial ideology to claim safety to. It is about as ridiculous as saying that a communist Chinese person can claim the right to cultural safety when you critique communism. Chinese people have a right to cultural safety. Communism is a political ideology that can be critiqued. Jews have a right to cultural safety. Zionism is a political ideology that can be critiqued. In fact, my social media post followed up with a clarification for those people who refuse to understand that distinction between Zionist and Jew, to say, if you think this was an attack on Jews and Judaism, then that is your anti-Semitism, not mine. I made that clarification, and I always and continue to do so. Zionism is a political ideology, and just as we say that white supremacy, communism, Marxism are all entitled to be critiqued, so too is Zionism.
And what does that term like cultural safety mean? When something is not entitled to cultural safety as an ideology, what does that actually look like in cultural spaces?
Yeah, so I actually spell it out. It means you do not have the right to claim cultural safety to espouse your ideology. So in practical terms, if I'm in a space and somebody starts defending the right to ethnically cleanse and the right to racially segregate and the right to steal land and the right to commit a genocide, should we afford them the safety to do so in polite society and say, yeah, you totally have the right to say that? I'm not going to be violent towards them. I'm not going to physically restrain them or kick them out. What I'm saying is that kind of justification should be condemned and critiqued. It should not be platformed and celebrated in the name of free speech. It is about as ridiculous as saying that a white supremacist is entitled to take to a stage and defend the right to subjugate black populations, or a misogynist can take to the stage and talk about the inferiority of women. Zionism is a political ideology that stands for settler colonialism and racial segregation. And so this is exactly the point I was making. I understand now that there was a lot of confusion about cultural safety, and that was my naivety then. That's the only point I'm willing to concede, that social media was not the best place to articulate that, and it should have been spelt out. But of course, Palestinians who are grieving and witnessing the genocide of their people are never afforded that kind of benefit of the doubt. We must always attach academic references and footnotes to our public, pronouncements.
I mean, I think social media is probably not a platform to discuss anything of note. Yeah. And yet, in many instances, it is the only platform
exactly
to us.
And I kind of disagree with this.
Constant push-pull. I completely understand that, and I
would have loved to do an op-ed about it. We're not allowed to do op-eds in any mainstream media, so we are left to the devices of an X post or Instagram.
I understand that social media is quite is very much under the microscope now. I mean, considering who owns most of it, that kind of stuff. But social media as a way of communicating, I don't think is at all a bad thing. It's the only public marketplace that ordinary people tend to have. It's the only place where people with big platforms can be confronted by the little guy to ask them, to bring about to ask them, to interrogate them about their own little small issue, no matter what it is, no matter how stupid it is. I think that social media does very much serve a purpose, and I'm not about to turn cynic about the idea of social media. I don't think it's a particularly healthy impulse to want to bring about its complete destruction. What I would say, if you really want to bring about a better kind of social media, is to break it up. So ensure that no one insane guy happens to own a large platform, not naming any names.
And posts created on Canva.
I mean, speaking of, this is again a terrible segue, but in terms of, expressing oneself, this has happened very recently. The cartoonist Kathy Wilcox has had a cartoon of hers cancelled, as in pulled. It was published by the SMH, and they have then since issued an apology saying that, we're sorry we caused offence. For those that haven't seen it, I'll just try and describe it. It was sort of a depiction of, sports stars, ex-politicians, members of the legal faculty, Benjamin Netanyahu, whoever it is, essentially pushing for a royal commission, or sort of being underneath the people that are pushing for a royal commission. And within that, your mention. So I just want to give you a read of that section. As Royal Commissioner Virginia Bell begins her inquiry, we will have more uncomfortable conversations about what constitutes free speech. The seeds of that debate have been sown in the past week with the withdrawal of a host of eminent writers from the Adelaide Writers' Week, following the removal of controversial Palestinian writer Randall Abdel Fattah from the program. Your thoughts on being described as a controversial writer, not an eminent writer? No, you've won, I don't know how many awards. Count, I've got 11. There's possibly more. Been published in over 15 countries. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, my sister's really funny. She's been keeping track of all the adjectives used to describe me.
Tell me. What are they?
Controversial, right? Anti-Semite. The latest is jihadist chic. It's what can I say?
I haven't heard that one. That's a new one.
what can I say? Again, people will see through that. It's like just blatant character assassinations. Controversial by whose standards? Wow, it's controversial to fight genocide.
This is a very sort of vague and nebulous question, but I'm sure there's a better way to kind of ask it, and I don't know what it is because I'm at odds with it myself. Like, what is now the best way to proceed from here? Because I think that there would be so many of our Ederati listening to this thinking, what do I do? I'm confused, I'm outraged, I'm shocked, I'm having like this, confluence of feelings, and I feel above all maybe helpless and despairing, which is a difficult place to be. So what do you do?
Okay, the first practical step. Yeah, I think the first practical steps when we've witnessed the decimation of a writers' festival is to really show solidarity when it comes to writers. I'm not talking about the big writers here, the big best-selling. They'll be okay. They'll be fine. I'm talking about the minority writers who, rely on these festivals to get their books out, who rely on those book sales, borrow their books from the library if you can't afford to buy their books, support them in that way, because this has been a massive loss of opportunity for them. And so I think that at least we can support them, through those kinds of practical acts of solidarity. And my mum's been going around to bookstores and calling them and platforming, like telling them, have you ordered Chelsea Watergo's book, Amy McQuire's book, Michaela Sahara's book, and just giving them lists of books to order and then buying them. These are the practical steps. That's how you show community care. Like in these moments of absolute despair and rage, and when you feel the force of the elites coming together, organizing themselves, and like the sort of the forces of power feel so impenetrable, we sometimes forget the power of community, and it's small acts of care that make such a difference. And I think that would be a beautiful act. And then more broadly is not to lose the sight of what's at stake here. I know that this sort of moment can be hijacked as a question about like liberal ideas of free speech only, but that can be a very dangerous slippery slope because not all speech is equal. I think that we should not lose sight of what's at stake here, and that is that there is a genocide that is being undertaken, and they are trying to silence us. They're trying to silence our voices about that. They're trying to say that objecting to condemning the killing of children, that deliberate starvation is wrong, that bombing refugee camps is wrong, that is anti-Semitic. So we need to collectively fight with all that we have to shut that down, to push back. And that is the biggest honor that you can do in the wake of Bondi. There's a way that we can flip the script because they're using that tragedy to further violence, to perpetuate violence, to cause division, to cause hate. But we can refuse that and reject that. And we can say, actually, we insist on a different kind of world here. We're not stupid. We're not going to allow you to politicize and weaponize our grief. We're actually going to use it and channel it into creating a world that we imagine that we all deserve. And I think that I am an idealist, I'm not a Pollyanna kind of optimist. I understand what we're up against, but every single day you have to carry out the kind of values that you want to see in a future world. You don't just wait for it to happen. It has to happen every day. I'm a firm believer in that. And so, yeah, like you asked me in the beginning, how do I feel? I feel exhausted, but I'm also galvanized by this moment because we showed the power of the collective. I think it's one of the few times that we've ever really shown, the March for Humanity across the Harbour Bridge is one of them, but this is a moment that's unprecedented. To collapse a festival in like 3 or 4 days and to show that community outrage over power, I think, come on, this is exciting. This is a sign of what we have.
I'm not excited.
I can't imagine any of those lobbyists, getting a decent human being to sign a letter of solidarity on their behalf. So many decent people have come out at their own cost and at material cost to stand in solidarity. That's beautiful.
Well, I think that might be the right note to end this chat on. Miranda, thanks so much for your time. And I guess we'll be waiting to see how the next few days, weeks, months unfold.
Thank you. Thanks for keeping up this podcast. It's bloody brilliant. It's great work.
Thank you.
We need it.
We appreciate every interview guest that ends interviews that way. So tick of approval for you.
The thing that,
thank you.
The thing that you have to remember is that every victory that we achieve, there'll be more outrage they will pour more money into, which we just don't have. More power will be brought to bear, which we also don't have.
And thank you to all of you for
always one step forward, 2 steps back. I apologize for being a pessimist here, but that's just what my experience has been over... Fucking old am I right now? At least 20 years of political involvement.
So make sure you tune on in there for a regular episode of We Used to Be Journos. The first of the year will be next week. And if you haven't bought tickets to our live show, go and do it! And we will see you all either in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Canberra. All the information in the show notes. Thank you very much. See you then.
Oh yeah, we'll just exclude Perth then. And Adelaide. Okay. How many people are in here? Is this the biggest scandal in Oz these days? There are larger... I mean, it depends what you mean by scandal. I mean, when you use the word scandal, it's generally an incident or a issue that's been picked up by the media and is being kind of propagated as being a scandal. So I mean, I'm gonna look at your question charitably, which is this the biggest kind of controversial topic? Let's put it that way in Australia these days. I don't think actually this is not. I don't think that the media. I don't think that this has officially reached the status of a scandal. Actually, but it's kind of a big deal. In Australia, what are the biggest scandals? Well, I mean, the Bondi Beach massacre itself and the intelligence failure surrounding it. One might call that a scandal. I'm kind of suspicious about that still, but I won't expand upon it. It'll take. We'll wait 2 to 5 years. Let's see what surfaces after that about exactly where those two guys, how those two guys were influenced and radicalized. Whenever somebody says that ISIS-affiliated people killed a bunch of other people, it just doesn't, it seems discordant to me in how I understand the world right now. The other one, we have the AUKUS thing with the submarines. We've paid, well, we're going to pay a minimum of 360 billion for nuclear submarines, which don't exist and probably won't ever exist. But it's probably going to be a lot more than that. It's a big boondoggle, essentially. What else is there? I mean, I guess the homelessness crisis is a scandal, but once again, none of these things have reached the official status according to the mainstream media as being a scandal. A scandal is when some dude fucks somebody in his staff that kind of lies about it. That's the thing that will really hit the headlines. Like that's what would be called a scandal. But once again, I'm interpreting your question as being a controversial issue. Aboriginal deaths in custody. Weirdly, a high amount of Indigenous people seem to die in custody, as well as being disproportionately arrested. So you could say that there's a scandal in waiting for how the police treat Indigenous people in this country. Yeah, so there are a few. At the moment, this is the hot topic, though. And by the way, the mainstream media here loves this kind of stuff because it's about evenly divided. People who think it's outrageous and people who think, yeah, we should just deport Randa Abdul Fattah right now. Like, such is the racism of Australia. Okay, I'm going to raid out. Thank you all for joining me. I'm going to raid Kairos. My next stream may possibly be Friday night, US time, or Saturday if you're in the Eastern Hemisphere, where we'll be gaming. So no seriousness at all. Thank you for joining me. Grand Designs Enjoyer, realist account yet. And I will see you next week. We just had 4 viewers ready to raid. That's just above my cutoff of 3. Bye!
Only Mike Pence, but that was 2022, the subject to